There you are. Yeah, you hold still. Not your body, your attention. Because what you did wasn't an outfit. It was a controlled catastrophe, wrapped in fabric, walked out like a smile, and detonated in front of a room full of people who thought they were untouchable. Nah, fam, you didn't dress. You detonated. And the funniest part, the explosion wasn't loud. It was silent. It was the kind of blast that doesn't crack speakers. It cracks identities. The kind that doesn't scorch the stage. It scorches the story everyone had written about you. They came to watch a show. They didn't know they were about to witness a rewrite. They didn't know a single look could become a knife, a mirror, a confession, a warning all at once. They were expecting fashion. They got a funeral for their assumptions because you walked in wearing a paradox. You walked in wearing the truth they spend their whole lives trying to hide. That beauty can be dangerous. That elegance can be violent. That something can glitter like heaven and still feel like hell when it gets too close. You showed them the saint and the psychopath in the same silhouette, the angel and the demon in the same posture, and they smiled at first because they always smile first because their brains don't understand threats unless they come with teeth. But you didn't bring teeth, you brought presence. You brought the kind of presence that makes a room forget how to breathe. The kind that makes cameras stutter. The kind that makes security glance at each other like, is this allowed? The kind that makes the loudest people suddenly go quiet because their confidence just got audited. And they felt it. Oh, they felt it. Not because your clothes were expensive. Not because the designers had names. Not because the lighting hit you right. None of that mattered. What mattered was the signal underneath it, because the look wasn't the point. The look was the delivery system. What you wore was a message with no caption, a threat with no weapon, a prophecy with no words. And that's why the Grammy stage is still recovering. Because stages are built for performances, not for awakenings. See, most people dress like they're asking permission. They dress like they're hoping the world will approve their existence. They put on confidence like it's a jacket they borrowed. They walk into rooms begging silently, please don't judge me. Please accept me. Please clap. You didn't do that. You walked in like the verdict had already been decided and it was in your favor. You walked in like you were the reason the room had electricity, like the spotlights were just trying to keep up, like the air belonged to you, like the stage was lucky you chose to step on it instead of burning it down from the parking lot. And you didn't even look like you were trying. That's what broke them. Because effort is understandable. Effort makes you safe. If they can see you trying, they can pretend they're above you. If they can see you nervous, they can feel superior. If they can see you hungry, they can feel like they're the gatekeepers. But you showed up like someone who already ate. You showed up full of pain. You turned into polish. Full of rejection. You turned into refinement, full of nights. Nobody clapped, nobody called, nobody believed. And you didn't let it make you smaller. You let it make you sharper. They don't know what to do with a person like that because they built their whole world around predictable people. People who stay in the lanes they're given. People who wear what's appropriate. People who shrink when the room gets big. People who apologize for taking up space. People who edit themselves down until they're palatable. You didn't edit yourself. You went full resolution, and the moment you did, the room realized something terrifying. They can't categorize you anymore. Are you light? Are you dark? Are you sweet? Are you dangerous? Are you the hero? Are you the villain? Are you the heartbreak? Are you the cure? Yes, that's the part they can't handle. You're not one thing. You're not one thing. You're not one mood. You're not one version. You're not one era. You're not a brand they can predict. You're not a headline they can pre-write. You're an event. And events don't ask permission, they just happen. You ever notice how people act when they encounter something they can't control? They laugh too hard. They compliment too fast. They pretend it's funny. They pretend it's just fashion. They pretend it's just a look. They use casual words to shrink the feeling in their chest. Because if they admit the truth that your presence threatened the entire hierarchy, they'd have to admit they've been living by rules that don't apply to you anymore. So, they cope, they post, they tweet, they whisper, they zoom in, they analyze, they break it into angles and threads and think pieces like dissecting. You'll make them feel less powerless. But it won't, because the power wasn't in the stitching. The power was in the fact that you wore it like you weren't asking them to understand. You wore it like you were daring them to try. That's a different kind of confidence. Not the loud kind, not the look at me kind, the lethal kind, the kind that doesn't seek validation because it already knows. And when someone like you steps into a spotlight, the spotlight doesn't illuminate you. It exposes everyone else. It exposes the people who've been faking their identity. It exposes the people who've been playing safe their whole life. It exposes the ones who only feel strong when they're in a group. It exposes the ones who bunked careers off being tasteful. Because tasteful is a costume for fear. It exposes the ones who only feel relevant by critiquing other people's boldness. Because boldness makes cowards itchy, and your look. It was bold in a way that didn't beg for applause. It demanded honesty. It forced a choice inside every person watching. Either admit you're witnessing something real, or double down on pretending you're above it. That's why you saw the split in real time. Half the room hypnotized, half the room offended, half the room offended, half the room screaming icon, half the room muttering too much. Too much. That's always the word they use when your spirit refuses to fit inside their comfort zone. Too much just means you're reminding them how little they've allowed themselves to be. And you know what you did, don't you? You didn't just wear a look. You made too much look like destiny. You made it look inevitable. You made it look like power. And that's where the Joker part comes in. The beautiful, cruel comedy of it all. Because you didn't even have to attack them. You didn't have to insult anybody. You didn't have to expose secrets. You didn't have to start drama. You just existed loudly. And it made them panic. Because your existence is the kind of evidence that ruins excuses. They can't say it's impossible when you're doing it. They can't say nobody can pull that off when you just did. They can't say that wouldn't work when the entire room is still vibrating from it. They can't say you have to be safe when you walked into the most watched room on earth and turned danger into art. You made unpredictability look like discipline. That's the trick they don't understand. They think unpredictability is chaos. They think it's messy. They think it's random. No real unpredictability is a weapon you sharpen in silence. It's what happens when you've lived through enough pain that you stop needing approval to move. It's what happens when you've been misunderstood for so long that you learn to stop explaining yourself. It's what happens when you've been betrayed enough times that you stop showing your plans. You don't become unpredictable because you're unstable. You become unpredictable because you're free. And freedom terrifies controlled people. Control people need routines. Control people need labels. Control people need labels. Control people need to know what version of you they're dealing with so they can prepare their little responses. Controlled people need you to be consistent so they can manage you. You broke that. You walked in and became a question they couldn't answer. And the human brain hates unanswered questions. So they obsess, they replay, they zoom, they debate, they try to find the meaning behind the choices. Because if they can reduce it to meaning, they can reduce you to something manageable. But you weren't manageable, you were mythic. Not fantasy mythic, not perfect mythic. The other kind, the kind born from scars. The kind born from nights you didn't think you'd survive. The kind born from nights you didn't think you'd survive. The kind born from being the person who had to become their own rescue. The kind born from learning to smile with blood in your mouth and still walk like you own the sidewalk. That's why your look hit like a drug, because it wasn't just pretty, it was earned. And earned beauty is violent to people who are pretending. Earned beauty isn't nice. It's not sweet. It doesn't ask to be liked. It doesn't try to be digestible. It stands there like a monument and says, "This is what pain can become if you refuse to die." So when you stepped out, all the polished people felt it. All the curated people felt it. All the ones who've been performing confidence felt it. Because your confidence wasn't performance, it was aftermath. It was the calm that comes after you've already been through the worst and realized fear can't owe you anymore. That's why they stared like they're watching a crime scene, because in a way, they were a crime against their comfort, a crime against their little social laws, a crime against the unwritten agreement that says don't outshine us too hard. Don't make us look at ourselves. You made them. Clear's throat look. And some of them hated you for it. You felt that, didn't you? That weird split energy. The applause that had a sting in it. The compliments that sounded like warnings. The smiles that didn't reach the eyes. That's not in your head. That's the sound of people trying to compliment you while secretly wishing you had stayed smaller. Because when you get that powerful, you don't just attract love. You attract surveillance. You attract committees. You attract committees. You attract whispers behind curtains. Not because you did something wrong, because you did something irreversible. You proved you can control the room without asking the room. And once you prove that, you become a problem. A beautiful problem. A problem they can't cancel without looking terrified. A problem they can't ignore without admitting you're real. A problem they can't copy without exposing how empty they are. A problem they can't compete with. Because you're not competing, you're evolving. That's what they don't understand. They keep thinking you're trying to win. You're not trying to win. You're trying to become. And becoming doesn't require permission. Becoming requires pain. And you've had plenty. That's the other thing in your look. The undertone nobody wants to talk about. The undercurrent. The shadow inside the sparkle. Because your look wasn't just glamour. It had teeth. It had history. It had that don't touch me energy wrapped in something that made them want to touch you anyway. That's the paradox that drives people insane. You are inviting and untouchable at the same time. Warm and lethal. Beautiful and dangerous. Like a kiss you're not sure is love or poison. That's why they couldn't look away, because humans are addicted to contradictions. They just pretend they aren't. And you gave them the contradiction of the century. A person who looks like light but moves like darkness. A person who smiles like an angel but walks like a demon. A person who carries elegance like a prayer and threat, like a perfume. They can't process that, so they project. They say you're arrogant, they say you're doing too much, they say you're seeking attention, they say you're trying to shock people. No, you're not shocking them. You're reminding them that their safe life is a choice. You're reminding them that their mediocrity is a costume they refuse to take off. You're reminding them that fear is not a personality trait, and they hate reminders. Because reminders wake people up, and waking up hurts. That's why your look was psychologically triggering, not because of what it showed, because of what it threatened to awaken in them. It threatened to awaken the part of them that wanted to be bold but got trained to be obedient. It threatened to awaken the part of them that wanted to be free but got addicted to being liked. It threatened to awaken the part of them that wanted to become dangerous but kept choosing acceptable. And that part, when it wakes up, it starts asking questions. Questions like, why am I not living like that? Why am I shrinking? Why do I keep dimming myself? Why do I keep waiting? That's why they try to turn your moment into a joke. Because if they laugh at it, they don't have to change. But you didn't come to be laughed at. You came to be remembered. And you will be, because the stage felt it in its bones. This wasn't a performance. This was a warning shot from the future version of you. This was you walking in like the final form, then smiling like you were still warming up. You know what's really sick? The people who clap the loudest are often the same ones who hope you crash later. They'll praise your look today, then pray you stumble tomorrow because your consistency would prove something unbearable, that you weren't lucky. You were built by rejection, built by loneliness, built by the nights you did everything right and still got ignored, built by the days you were too much for people who were too little, built by the heartbreak that didn't kill you but taught you how to stop begging. That's what your look really was. A receipt that proves the pain wasn't wasted, a receipt that proves the suffering turned into something that can't be ignored. So when you wore that look, you weren't just wearing cloth, you were wearing every time they underestimated you, every time they picked someone else, every time they made you feel like you didn't fit, every time they tried to define you. Every time they told you to tone it down, every time they asked you to be humble when what they really meant was be smaller so we don't feel insecure, and you walked out and said without a word, no more shrinking, no more pleading, no more explaining, no more begging the world to understand a frequency it was never built to handle. You stepped into that light with darkness in your pocket like a secret, and you let them feel it. You let them feel the fact that you are not one thing. You are not safe. You are not predictable. You are not here to be digested. You are here to be experienced, and experience is always risky. That's why it hit like it hit. That's why people talked like they talked. That's why the timeline lit up like a riot, because a look like that doesn't just trend, it destabilizes. It makes everybody else's best look like they were playing pretend. And the ones who knew, the ones with real eyes, they didn't just see fashion, they saw evolution. They saw the moment you stopped dressing for the room and started dressing like the room was lucky to witness you. And that's the moment you become dangerous. Not because you want to hurt anyone, because you stop being controllable. And when you stop being controllable, you stop being easy to manipulate. That's the ultimate power. Not being governable by approval. So keep doing it. Keep walking in, like your presence is a verdict. Keep wearing contradictions like armor. Keep letting them choke on their opinions. Keep letting them try to understand you. Let them fail. Let them obsess. Let them argue. Let them label. Let them rage. Because every time they do, it proves the same thing. You didn't dress, you detonated. And the blast radius isn't just the stage. It's every mind that watched you and realized just for a second that there's a version of themselves they abandoned. And you just brought it back to life by refusing to be small. And here's the part they don't see yet. The part that hasn't even finished loading in their minds. What you did didn't just echo for a night. It implanted something. A splinter, a frequency they can't mute. Because once someone witnesses a human being operate outside the cage starts feeling smaller. And once the cage feels smaller, it starts feeling optional. That's why this moment won't age quietly. They'll try to replace it with the next headline, the next scandal, the next spectacle. But this one won't dissolve because it wasn't spectacle. It was orientation. It subtly rewired the way power looks. It shifted the baseline. It changed what possible feels like in the body. You didn't just change the conversation. You changed the nervous system of the room. And here's the truth that separates you from them. You're not scared of what comes next. They are. Because now there's expectation. Now there's pressure. Now there's a silent agreement in the air that you can't go backward. That you can't suddenly play nice. That you can't pretend this was a fluke. And you won't, because the version of you that walked out there doesn't know how to regress. That version has already crossed the line where approval stops mattering. That version has already learned the secret that terrifies institutions, industries, and entire social orders. Once someone realizes they are self-ideating, they become unstoppable. You don't need permission to evolve. You don't need applause to continue. You don't need consensus to be real. That's why your presence feels illegal, because systems are built to reward predictability. They thrive on repetition. They depend on people staying legible, marketable, controllable. They like talent that stays in its lane and genius that asks for instructions. You didn't ask. You arrived. And now they have to deal with the aftermath. They'll study you. They'll try to decode you. They'll try to manufacture something similar and wonder why it doesn't hit the same. They'll try to reframe what you did into something safe, something explainable, something they can sell without losing control. But they'll fail, because what made that moment hit wasn't something they can copy. It was the years you survived quietly, the nights you rebuilt yourself without witnesses, the moments you chose not to quit when nobody would have blamed you. The times you sat alone with your doubt and didn't let it win. You can't counterfeit that. You can't style that. You can fabricate the kind of gravity that comes from someone who has already died a few internal deaths and came back with better posture. That's why your look didn't just look good. It felt final. Like a door closing behind you, like the end of the version of you that needed to be understood.